Well, hello there and welcome back to Cloud Plus Refresh 2024. So once again, we're doing this because, hey, we have this new certification here. I'll link to this down below. It was released in 2024 in July. Sorry, it took me till September, October to get to this. I'll actually have this, I'm recording this last video October 2nd, which is good because CompTIA has the trainer series going on. I've seen the first one. The second one's out. I haven't been able to do it, but so I might see if there's anything I've missed that I'll have to add from that. Maybe also I'll have probably a few videos that come after this of things that, hey, updates or maybe comments that I get to the videos that I'll add new to this playlist. I'm going to keep this playlist to the certification and specifically to mostly the terms that were going on there. So we've already done page 1. We're on page 2, and we're finishing up page 2. We're on troubleshooting, which is 12%, and we have these 3 items right here, and that's what we're going to do today. Now, if we look, there is a page 4, but it really just talks about kind of the exam. So this is not, we're not going to really probably cover page 4 all, except for we'll say, hey, these are well-paying positions. The median annual salary for system administrators is $90,000, and cloud demand is very high. So let's get into the troubleshooting. So troubleshooting. On the guide, we saw the things we're going to cover are: given a scenario, troubleshoot deployment issues; given a scenario, troubleshoot networking issues; and given a scenario, troubleshoot security issues. Wow, lots of scenarios, right? So maybe we need a first refresh on the general troubleshooting steps. So according to CompTIA. So CompTIA, right here. Sorry, link opened it in a new one. So CompTIA troubleshooting methodology. We identify the problem, we establish a theory, we test the theory, we establish a plan or action to resolve it and identify potential effects. We implement the solution or escalate as necessary. We verify full system functionality and, if applicable, implement preventative measures. We document findings, actions, outcomes, and lessons learned. And then they go into depth into each of those. Okay? So I'll link to this down below. So those are the steps. So given a scenario, troubleshoot deployment issues. So this is where we need to think about things like infrastructure. So is there a networking problem? What's the possible issue? Is it an IP did not get its IP? Is there an issue with DNS, DHCP? Trying to identify what issue we have and slowly troubleshoot it. So is it more of an application issue? So is there maybe a quota or limit on certain things? Maybe we missed that during our review of the system because we didn't have enough load. Is there a configuration issue? Now that can be in the infrastructure or the application side. Maybe there's some type of a password or environmental issue we didn't set properly. Is there a code error? Was there some type of a bug that we missed that just so happens appears in prod that did not appear? Maybe it was in the actual deploying of the code. It was a pipeline issue and there was an error in the build. So digging in, looking at the logs, trying to understand what may have happened. Was it one of the tests that we have that automatically triggers as part of the pipeline? Is the rollback? Maybe it had an issue and it went to rollback and the rollback had a problem. So troubleshooting those steps. Is it a cloud specific issue? Maybe there's just so happens to be a problem with the cloud at the moment you're rolling out, and it's not your stuff, it's the cloud. But in some ways that means maybe you didn't architect your stuff right. Does it need to be able to handle cloud issues? um, just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean that it's 100% up. They have their SLAs with you, and they do have challenges on occasion. So being able to troubleshoot, is it your problem? Is it the cloud? Most of the cloud providers will have a dashboard that will let you know of issues, and you can see if things are healthy or not. Maybe there's a service limit. So a great example is with EC2s in AWS. You're limited to, I think, 10 of a certain type in an availability zone. That's so if hackers gain access, they can't just spin up a ton of different systems. Now you can reach out to AWS and you can say, hey, I need this increased to this number, and I know that this could provide hackers with the ability to do more things, but I'm willing to take that risk, and I've done these things to mitigate it. But you might not know about some of those limits until you've reached them the first time. So that's one of those hard things to understand. That's where it's good to get someone who's a seasoned professional to help, so that they've already experienced this with someone else and can make it so that you can learn from others' issues and not your own. Maybe it's something to do with permissions. Maybe the permissions have not been set up quite properly for the deployment. Maybe it's a connectivity issue. And if it's a connectivity issue, maybe it's a connectivity to the data or the database. And that allows it not to function properly. So a lot of it is understanding the issue, and that's where monitoring and logging comes into play, but also the troubleshooting steps. Trying to using some brain functions to try and understand what the issue is that you are seeing. So thinking about deployment. So you can often see misconfigured templates because there's always a slight change from a non-prod to a prod environment, because you're going from one environment to another. So there can always be a misconfiguration issue. Missing or incorrect tags. Maybe there's something that was decided to do a non-prod, and that's been implemented, but not everything in non-prod is moving forward at the same time. So prod and non-prod are out of sync. They are, because you're always changing. And not all of the things are being synced up to prod at the same time. And maybe there was a dependency that wasn't known or was not understood well enough. Or maybe there's insufficient capacity. Maybe you just hit some issues with some configurations on the scaling or compute, storage, or network. Or maybe you just have oversubscribed too much and you're now having latency issues. And latency issues, if they get big enough, can actually cause outages. So what about resource utilization? Is your CPU utilization just getting too high on the actual physical hardware? Now, if you're using a public cloud provider, that's their problem, and they're watching those things. And sometimes I've got notified that, hey, we're going to have to migrate you off the system because we need to do something to it. So there might be a brief outage, or sometimes it just does it automatically. Same with the GPU. All of these can have potential issues there. Memory, storage, the network bandwidth, network latency. Some of these can be issues on how you've configured your deployment. Some of them can actually be hardware related. So common performance issues. Memory management is always a problem. Java, it took me a little while to realize that Java you needed to double the memory for the OS or whatever you put for the JVM. It's otherwise it just does not work well. But a lot of our Java stuff can run very small. So is the service just overloaded? Did you get more traffic than expected, or maybe it was just slower than expected, and so things are backing up and you're falling behind. You're not scaling up fast enough, or maybe you can't scale large enough. So this is where you really need to do load testing in non-prod. Is it incorrectly configured or failing to load balance properly? So troubleshoot automation or orchestration issues. So is there an account mismatch? Maybe the change management failure. Maybe something was missed in change management, or maybe change management wasn't followed properly. Was a name changed, or an IP address was changed? Maybe it's from the environment from dev to prod. Maybe you're still pointing back at some non-prod resources and someone shut that down. That's really bad, by the way. That's one of the reasons why it's good to shut down all non-prod environments regularly to see what breaks in prod and make sure it's not pointing at non-prod. Location changes. Is there a version or feature mismatch? Is there a tool incompatibility? This is where just time can cause something to fail. For example, I had a developer not happy at all with me at one point in time because their stuff stopped working, and it's because they were using deprecated features, and eventually those features went away. So deprecated means it's was old and they're still kind of holding on to it, but it's not supported and is eventually going away. But their code used to work and now it doesn't work, and they're wondering what changed, and the answer is time. And eventually that deprecated features were gone with time. So API version, maybe it's incompatible. I'm going to go back to time. Maybe it is actually just time as well. Because if systems do pay attention to the clock, and maybe there was an issue with understanding clock functions, maybe that's what changed. Maybe it can't handle a larger date value. We saw a lot of the concern over that for Y2K. Less issues, but a lot of concern. Job validation issues. Did it validate properly? Was it a failure in the patch? Did something not go right? Deployment issues. So is there a licensing issue? Maybe you didn't license it properly, or maybe it's charging you a ton extra because of the way you tested. Is it a vendor-related issue? Did you migrate from one platform to another and there was something that was not realized as different? Do you integrate properly between your vendors? Did you hit maybe a limit, like the number of API calls you can use for a specific application? If you're doing a lot of custom stuff to your software as a service, you might hit this because vendors may not expect you to hit the API so many times, and they might try to charge you a lot for it. So given this scenario, troubleshoot network issues. So this is where make sure you have an IP that is the proper IP, and that's what you expect it would be. DHCP, is it working properly if you're using DHCP? DNS, does it have the proper name? So there are lots of tools that you can use to try and understand this. NSLOOKUP and dig for DNS. IPconfig, IF config, CFG or config, depending on the OS that you're using. What about the routing? If you looked at the route tables, are they set up properly? Are they being overridden? I've seen DNS and routes overridden on individual systems, especially when there's an IP issue with going through a VPN to another partner. Sometimes there's IPs overlaps and they're hard to handle. So is something just slow? Because, hey, maybe you've hit the max bandwidth you're going on the network. Maybe there's a misconfiguration. Maybe there's a storm on the network. Maybe you don't have proper access and so things are being dropped. Maybe there's a firewall in the way. With that being said, I have seen new systems going live and having intelligent security software, not realizing that, hey, this is a new system and thinking it's nefarious, and it starts fighting with it and shutting it down automatically. So is there some network appliance that is trying to keep you safe that is ending up not allowing you to deploy new systems? Do you need a special pipe that wasn't created, so like a VPN or a direct connect between two things that didn't get set up before go live and was missed as part of the go live? So this is one of those pieces where there's so many things moving at the same time. Did you get all of them, or did you miss something? Do you have your network set up properly? All your subnetting? Do you have the ways to get from subnet to subnet? Do you have your gateways in place? Load balancers, are they set up? Do you know how to operate them well? Are you monitoring them well? Are they getting load the way you expect them? How is it? Is it round robin? Is it based on which one's going fastest? Or is it based on which one is less busy? So what's your load balance configuration? How does it prefer where to send stuff? Does your stuff need to be sticky? So sometimes systems can't be load balanced well because they have session state. So it's keeping track of the user, usually with a cookie on the browser, and that's specific to some hardware behind the scenes, or an operating system, I should say, because it could be virtual. And the cluster just can't manage those sessions at a cluster level. So oftentimes you prefer to send people back to the prior one. So it's sticky there, and is that causing problems? If it's not sticky, there's usually a cost to reestablish some type of relationship when you're doing load balancing. So the persistence of a session. Maybe there's some type of other higher availability issue there. But there also could be a network issue on the cloud side. Maybe it's cloud specific again. Now, one of the problems with cloud is public cloud is it adds more complexity. And so you're deviating from the keep it simple principle. And some people, because of that, will constantly go to blame the cloud. And I've even seen when it's plain that it's not the cloud, people blame the cloud. Just be cautious that you're not blaming them too much, because if you are, then you're not doing your due diligence to look into things and make your systems better. And they're going to keep having problems, and no one likes a system that keeps having problems, and that often looks bad upon the technical people that are using them, that are maintaining them. So don't keep blaming the cloud. Try and find ways to solve it, even if it's not your problem. So monitor and diagnose these tools diagnose these issues with the tools available to you. So you should get very familiar with things like TCP dump, Wireshark, traceroute, ping, dig, ncat. There's so many tools out there, nmap, to try and identify issues. SolarWind, Nagios can help with network performance as well, and do checks. Okay. Common network configuration issues. Maybe you're not setting up peering well. Maybe you have an incorrect subnet. incorrect IP address, IP space. So the route's not set up properly. There's some defaults that are wrong, static versus dynamic. Maybe the firewall is not set up properly and that's incorrectly administered, or there's microsegmentation that's not working well in your favor. Maybe there's some issues with network address translation. Maybe there's a VPN. I talked about having basically subnets for one client and their partner, and they had a VPN, and now you're having this IP clashing on both sides. So how do you handle that? The source and destination IPs. Load balancers. There's what type of methods are there? What are the headers required for it? What protocols are you supporting on those load balancers? Is there encryption? Because there dang well needs to be on almost any load balancer should be doing encryption. There are some times when you have a load balancer down to the database level that you probably wouldn't do encryption because it's in a secure enough place. But most of the time, you should just enable encryption and do it encrypted anyway, as long as the performance hit's not too great. Backends, encryption versus front ends, and making sure that all of them can talk properly. So DNS records, are they manually or automatically set up? Do you have your VLAN, your XVLAN, and Geneva to be able to migrate virtual machines between even data centers, if that's a requirement? Are your proxies configured properly? Do you understand the size of your packet? How big is your maximum transmission unit? If things get slow on your network, do you have quality of service there so that the important things will get priority over someone watching Netflix, for example? Is there time synchronous issues going on? Because if there is, then authentication is going to have issues. The logging's not going to be as good. You need to fix your time. So what about network security groups with ACLs, and what are you inheriting the security from above? So just if it's something blocked anywhere, it's not going to make it down. So so network troubleshooting tools, you really need to know ping. Ping is so useful. So yeah, you just need to know ping. And some people are starting to block it, but it's still very useful. Trace route, spelled differently depending if you're using Linux, which you should, or Windows, which I feel sorry for you. Making sure you know how to flush your DNS so that you can get that updated earlier. But there's a whole process to have your names kind of bubble out to the internet, right? ipconfig, ifconfig, and ip commands to try and get your IP address and different configurations associated with your IPs. NSLOOKUP and dig to look up host names and get information on them. netstat and ss to see the status of a system. I use netstat all the time. I think that's a command I use almost daily. Route, identifying the route between a place and what the priorities are, making sure you have the proper priorities so that you're sending packets to the right router. ARP, understanding what ARP requests are coming and making sure no one's poisoned your ARP. Curl, being able to do just standard web requests. I also like wget because I'm on the Linux side. So you should be familiar with both of those. Being able to capture packets, which you got to be careful because depending on what organization you're with, they might not allow you to capture packets of their organization. They might have an acceptable use policy that prohibits it. But yeah, as an IT professional, you're probably going to be capturing packets on occasion and getting stuff like that regularly. And then after you capture it, you need to be able to analyze it. That's where Wireshark comes into play. But also being able to encrypt things. So OpenSSL can create your certificate, your keys. It can do all sorts of cool things. So that package. So deployment issues. So making sure that your cloud service provider or internet service provider doesn't have an outage. Identifying your performance degradation. Is it latency? Where's it at? Configuration, understanding, making sure your scripts are good, and that your applications in containers, are they easy to move? Given a scenario, troubleshoot security issues. So this is the last one. Woohoo! But we have quite a few slides with it. So is it misconfigured or incorrect? This happens all the time where we make mistakes. Is there some type of multi-factor authentication process that has not happened to allow certain things to proceed? Is there an issue with account lockouts or failures that is causing you to be caught up? Maybe it's asking you asking your continuous your deployment model if it's a robot or not, and it can't handle it because it is, and it can't lie, right? Anyway, is encryption set up properly? Did something get missed? Are you having things transmitted in an unsafe way? Is it able to be reached by the people who need to access it? Are you watching for vulnerabilities, and what is your governance and compliance? Let's get into some of that a little bit more. So security issues. So privilege. Maybe you're missing something it's incomplete. Maybe you can escalate and you shouldn't, or maybe you should be able to and you can't. Are the keys set up properly? Are they the production keys? So can you authenticate? So do you know who people are? Are things authorizing properly? Are they allowed to do what they're supposed to do? Or can they do more or less? They shouldn't be able to do either more or less. Are the security groups in place? So the firewalls, the network firewalls, is there even directory level security groups if needs be? So security issues. Maybe the keys or certificates have been expired or revoked. Is there a trust issue that you don't have the entire chain of trust? Has something been compromised? Is something misconfigured? Or someone misapplied something? Maybe there's unencrypted data, and so things have been breached, or they're misclassified, and you put data in a place it shouldn't be, so it needs to be moved back. So lack of encryption in protocols. Are you using insecure ciphers? Are the proper endpoints exposed, and are ones that are not supposed to be exposed not exposed? Are you using an intrusion prevention system, or are you just detecting and then having manual intervention? Are there network access controls in place, or a web application firewall? Are you using supported protocols? Did you upgrade a system and so now it's on a better thing, but maybe some of the older systems that are still around can't talk to it anymore? Are you able to handle external and internal attacks? So always consider corporate policies, procedures, and impacts before implementing any changes. So you need to identify the problem. So you oftentimes with that, you're questioning the user, the changes, and the computer before making the changes. You are inquiring regarding the environment or the infrastructure changes as well. You establish a theory of probable cause. You question the obvious. Too often people have come over and said, hey, I'm having a problem. I've already checked this. It's not it. And one of the first things I do is I check what they told me they've already checked. And it's amazing how often that's the problem. Because they were right. And they just checked and they thought it was okay, but the answer was no. They had their check was not good enough. So test the theory, determine the cause. If necessary, conduct external and internal research based upon the systems. That's establishing. So once the theory is confirmed, you can determine the next steps to resolve the problem. If the theory is not confirmed, you reestablish a new theory or escalate. So it's when you're testing the theory, you're constantly going through, did I solve it? Did I not solve it? And then you have to think about, do I roll back what I've done and try something else? Because you don't want to make too many changes, especially if they don't seem to help. But sometimes it's multiple things that you need to do. So it's hard. Establish a plan of action to resolve the problem and implement the solution. Verify full system functionality and, if applicable, implement preventive measures. And then document the findings, the actions, and the outcomes from the process. So, good luck on the test. Please let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover. And thank you for sticking around for another long one. We'll see you in the next video.